on lesson 8, cycle 3, the beast sequence, chapters 12 through 14. I've done this a little bit different. I didn't do a whole lot from the workbook we got today, other than the introduction did come out of that. But I've taken each one of these verses and I've tried to translate the symbolisms into what John intended or what and were meant to be symbolizing. I hope it's done right and done proper. If there's any questions or anything, please ask. If you think I've said something wrong, please tell me, because this was not easy for me to do. But anyway, if in lines of introduction, in this lesson, a new cycle of vision begins. The reader is confronted with 7 figures or personages. The number 7 is again used to symbolize fullness or completeness of this mighty struggle involving characters from both heaven and earth. A different side of this drama is pictured here. Chapters 1 through 11 has given us a portrait of Christ as the ruler of the church and controller of the world's destiny, whereas chapters 12 through 22 place the emphasis on the trials and triumphs of the church. So Christ is at the center of the first part of the book, while the church is at the center of this portion. In chapters 12 through 14, 7 personages or figures are involved in intense conflict and hostility toward one another. These personalities consist of the woman, which is either the faithful Israelites or the church, the man-child, which is the earthly Jesus, a giant red dragon, which symbolizes Satan, the archangel Michael, God's angelic messenger, the beast out of the sea symbolizes the Roman Empire, the beast out of the earth symbolizes emperor worship or the emperors of Rome, and the lamb is the victorious Jesus. When each of these figures is identified and its part in the drama is seen in its true light, then the nature and sphere of this raging struggle will become apparent. Chapter 12, the vision of the woman and the dragon, Romans 1 through 6. John, could you read those for us?
Sure. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven, and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. The child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Thank you. In verses 1 and 2 of chapter 12, in John's vision, a woman, which symbolizes the nation of Israel of the church, and by saying nation of Israel, I'm talking about faithful Israelites, appears. She is a glorious figure, arrayed with the sun and moon under her feet, which symbolizes a special status and role in God's plan for Israel and the church, and a 12-star crown upon her head, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. But she is in pain. And that symbolizes the people of Israel and the church are struggling against Rome. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. Symbolism here is for the Christians not to conform to the world, but to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. Verses 3 and 4. Another sign appeared to John, a red dragon, which symbolizes Satan, with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems on its heads. Those symbolize powerful worldly empires or political powers that have persecuted God's people throughout history. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, symbolizing Satan's power and influence to deceive and corrupt a significant portion of God's followers. The dragon Satan stood before the woman, the church, or the faithful Israelites, ready to give birth waiting on the arrival of Jesus to devour her child as soon as it was born, symbolizing Satan desired to destroy Jesus as soon as he was born, representing the ongoing spiritual battle between good and evil. Verses 5 and 6, she bore a male child, Jesus Christ, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. That symbolizes power to rule. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. That symbolizes the ascension to heaven after his resurrection, signifying the victory of good over evil. Then the woman, which symbolizes God's people, the church, fled into the wilderness seeking refuge, protection from persecution, where she, the church, has a place prepared by God, a place of safety during a time of great tribulation that should feed her there 1,260 days, which symbolizes a limited but significant period of time during the struggle with Rome. Any questions on those first 6 verses? Larry, would you read verses 7 through 12?
What chapter? 12.
Revelations 12, verses 7 through 12.
Chapter 12. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
Thank you, Larry. Verses 7 through 12, Satan is thrown out of heaven. Verses 7, 8, and 9, and war broke out in heaven. Michael, the archangel Michael, and his angels fought with the dragon, symbolizing conflict between God and Satan. And the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon Satan was cast out to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him, symbolizing the pending defeat of the Roman Empire. Verse 10, Then John heard a loud voice, God's voice, saying in heaven, Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren who have accused them before God day and night have been cast down. This is the ultimate defeat of Rome. Verse 11, And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. That symbolizes the defeat of the Romans because of the Christians' belief in Jesus Christ, by the word of their testimony, which symbolizes a bold proclamation of their faith. Verse 12, Therefore rejoice, O heaven, and you who come, you who dwell in them. That's the Christians rejoicing. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and sea. That's the Romans. For the devil has come down to you, and as Satan is in the hearts of the Romans, causing a great wrath, because he knows that he, Satan, has a short time. Romans will soon be defeated. Verses 13 through 17, the woman persecuted. Darren, would you read that? Verses 13 through 17 of chapter 12.
And when the dragon saw that it had been thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. And the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman in order that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, she was nourished for time to time and half the time from the presence of the serpent. And the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth over after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with blood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus.
Thank you, Darren. Verse 13. Now when the dragon Satan saw that he had been cast down to the earth, he persecuted the woman, that's the church, who gave birth to the male child. That symbolizes the believers in Christ. Verse 14. But the woman, the church and the believers, was given 2 wings of a great eagle. That symbolizes divine protection and deliverance, that she may fly into the wilderness to her safe place, a safe haven, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a times, which symbolizes a limited period of intense persecution from the presence of the serpent that symbolizes Rome. Verse 15, so the serpent Rome spewed water out of his mouth like a flood. That's symbolizing an overwhelming force of persecution after the woman, the church, that he, Rome, might cause her, the church, to be carried away, destroyed by the flood, again symbolizing Roman's persecution. Verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. This verse symbolizes the importance of living in harmony with others, avoiding pride and arrogance, associate with humble by being of the same mind with one another. Verse 17, and the dragon Satan was enraged with the woman, the church, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is symbolizing Satan, that Satan will continually be in conflict with faithful Christians throughout history until the end of time. Any questions on any of that chapter? Okay, we'll be going to chapter 13 now. Tina, could you read verses 1 through 10?
And then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, and there was a crown on each horn. Then a name against God was written on each head. This beast looked like a leopard, with feet like a bear's feet, and mouth like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave the beast all of his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast looked as if it had been killed by a wound, but this death wound was healed. Then the whole world was amazed and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given his power to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast, asking, who is like the beast? Who can make war against it? The beast was allowed to say proud words and words against God, and it was allowed to use its power for 42 months. It used its mouth to speak against God's name, against the place where God lives, and against all those who live in heaven. It was given power to make war against God's holy people and to defeat them. It was given power over every tribe, people, language, and nation, and all who live on earth will worship the beast, all the people since the beginning of the world whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. The Lamb is the one who was killed. How far?
Through 10, verse 10.
Anyone who has ears should listen. If you are to be a prisoner, then you will be a prisoner. If you are to be killed with the sword, then you will be killed with the sword. This means that God's holy people must have patience and faith.
Okay, verse 1. John stood on the sand of the sea, and he saw a beast rising up out of the sea. That beast is a symbol of the Roman Empire. Having 7 heads, symbolizing major world powers, and 10 horns, symbolizing kings or nations under the dominant power of Rome, and on the horns 10 crowns, symbolizing individual power and authority of each smaller king or nation under the beast's control or under Rome's control, and on his head a blasphemous name. That was the name of Roman emperors portraying themselves as a god. Verse 2, now the beast Rome, which he saw, was like a leopard, symbolizing the swiftness and cunning and deceptive nature of the beast of Rome. His feet were like the feet of a bear, symbolizing strength and stability, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion, symbolizing power to devour, destroy, and intimidate. The dragon, Satan, gave him Rome, his power, his throne, his seat of power, and great authority. Verse 3, and John saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded. That symbolizes a significant setback or apparent defeat of Rome. And his deadly wound was healed, symbolizing a resurgence of power and influence. And all the world, the vast majority of humanity, marveled and followed Rome. Verse 4, so they, the people submitting to Rome, worshipped the dragon, Satan, who gave authority to the beast Rome, and they worshipped it, that symbolizing giving complete allegiance and reverence to the beast or to Rome, saying, who is like the beast, symbolizing blasphemous worship of Rome, and who is able to make war with him, symbolizing the perceived invincibility and overwhelming power of Rome. Verse 5, and he, Rome, was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, symbolizing a powerful entity who arrogantly defied God with boastful words and actions. And he, Rome, was given authority by Satan to continue for 42 months. And 42 months is the same as 1,260 days, 3.5 years, another symbol of a limited period of time of intense opposition to God. Verse 6, then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, symbolizing Roman openly defied and insulted God. To blaspheme his name, this refers to Domitian declaring himself as a god and attacking God's name. His tabernacle, which was heaven, and those who dwell in heaven, that's the believers, a blatant and public rejection of God's power and authority. Verse 7, it was granted to him, Rome, to make war with the saints, the believers, and to overcome them, to persecute and oppress God's people. And authority, power was given to him, Rome, over every tribe, tongue, and nation, depicting power given to Rome by Satan. Verse 8, all who dwell on earth will worship him. Nearly everyone on earth will follow Rome and worship their emperor, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world, symbolizing those who will not receive eternal life. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. Basically, pay close attention and heed the warnings being given about Rome. Verse 10, Rome, who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. The Romans who persecute and capture God's people will ultimately face the same fate. A call for the faithful to endure persecution with patience, knowing that God will ultimately vindicate them. Rome, the Romans, who kills with the sword must be killed by the sword, symbolize those who use violence will ultimately face the same fate. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints, that's the believers, that they should endure persecution and remain steadfast in their faith. Verses 11 through 18, the beast of the earth. Sonny, will you read that?
And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of the miracles which had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Did you say through 18?
Yes, through 18.
And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the numbers of the name. Here is wisdom. Let him that have understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
Thank you.
What is?
Verse 11, then John saw another beast coming up out of the earth. This symbolizes the emperor worship. And he had horns like a lamb. It symbolizes a false prophet or a deceptive religious leader who appears harmless. And spoke like a dragon, symbolizing the deceptive and menacing nature of the Roman emperor Domitian. Verse 12, and he, Domitian, exercises all the authority of the first beast, Rome, in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. Domitian forcing the faithful to worship Rome, whose deadly wound was healed. Again, it symbolizes the Roman resurgence of power and gaining renewed influence over inhabitants of the earth. Verse 13, he, the Roman emperor, performs great signs, has deceptive power, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth, symbolizing the deceptiveness of the Roman Empire in the sight of man. Verse 14, and he, the Roman emperor, deceives those who dwell on the earth, the unbelievers, by those signs, deceptive and powerful displays performed by the Roman emperor, which he was granted to do in the sight of Rome, symbolizing the power of evil that tempts humans to engage in the sinful desires and actions of the Roman Empire, telling those who dwell on earth to make an image of the beast, advising the unfaithful to worship the image of the Roman Empire, imposing false worship on the earth, who was wounded by the sword and lived. That's again the Roman Empire. Verse 15, he, the Roman emperor, was granted power to give birth to the image of the beast, its ability to give life and power to an idolatrous representation of an evil system, compelling people to worship it. That the image of the beast, the Roman emperor, should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast be killed. Domitian was a powerful and deceptive force, compelling people to follow his authority under the threat of severe consequences, persecution for those who refuse to conform. Verse 16, he, the Roman emperor, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. This mark was to symbolize complete allegiance and submission to the Roman emperor. Verse 17, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, the Roman Empire, or the number of his name, which is 666. And all I can find out about the 666 is that it was a symbol, whereas 777 symbolizes a complete fullness, 666 is an incompleteness. It's not a full, it's an incomplete. In other words, it's going to perish in the end. It's not going to be there permanently. For it was the number of a man, the Roman Empire, his number is 666. Okay, takes us to chapter 14. Is there any questions on chapter 13?
question, but to me, it's interesting that, these people are being forced to worship these Roman empire, or Roman, the kings or the emperors. And, they had to show that they went and bowed down to them. They had to get a certificate to do that. And if they didn't get that certificate, they couldn't buy and sell, they couldn't make a living, essentially. And these people, they had what seemed like a simple decision, whether to go and bow down to the emperor and get their certificate or not, and God has weighed in on this, and it mattered to God. So these people were thinking, well, it's just, patriotism, or, they just do it. They don't really worship them, but they do it to get their certificate. But it mattered to God because it was disloyalty. It's idolatry. Essentially, it was what it was. And, it was a decision that seemed, pretty easy, but, they were struggling with it. And, it mattered to God.
Agree. Chapter 14, God's answer to the two evil beasts. Verses 1 through 5. Connie, could you read those?
Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. They are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among the men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God.
Thank you. Verse 1, Then John looked, and behold, a lamb, symbolizing Jesus, standing on Mount Zion, symbolizing the returning to Jerusalem at the end of the tribulation. And with him, 144,000. That symbolizes God's faithful followers who survived the tribulations and are sealed for salvation. Having his Father's name written on their foreheads, again, a complete dedication to God, his chosen people. Verse 2, And John heard a voice from heaven, a direct communication from God, like the voice of many waters, symbolizing a powerful and overwhelming sound of a large multitude, and like the voice of a loud thunder, symbolizing the powerful and awe-inspiring nature of God's voice. And John heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, the beautiful and harmonious praising and worship offered to God. Verse 3, they sang as it were a new song before the throne. This is symbolizing the beginning of a new era in God's kingdom, redemption of the church and their triumph over Rome before the four living creatures. This symbolizes the presence of God's ultimate authority and holiness, and the elders, which symbolizes the redeemed people of God, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000, those who remain loyal to God to the tribulation with Rome. Verse 4, those are the ones who were not defiled with the woman. That's those who remain spiritually pure and faithful to God, for they were virgins. That's those with spiritual purity. These are the ones who followed the Lamb, Jesus, wherever he goes, those with complete and unwavering loyalty to Jesus Christ. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits, symbolizing the 144,000 considered, the first part of the larger harvest, to God and to the Lamb, Jesus. Verse 5, and in their mouth was found no deceit, no evilness, for they were without fault before the throne of God. Verses 6 through 13. Angie, would you mind reading those?
And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea and the fountains of the water. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angel, in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, said the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them.
Thank you, Larry. Verse 6, Then John saw another angel, another messenger in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, that's the unchanging and eternal message of salvation through Jesus Christ, to preach to those who dwell on the earth. That's the universal proclamation of the gospel message to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. That's the universal reach of the gospel message for everyone on earth. Verse 7, saying with a loud voice, a powerful and clear proclamation of God's message. Fear God and give glory to him, symbolizing worship and respect to God, acknowledging his power and authority. For the hour of his judgment has come. God's judgment is imminent. And worship him who made heaven and earth and the sea and the springs of water. Verse 8, and another angel, another messenger, followed, saying, Babylon is fallen. That's to symbolize the immediate downfall of the Roman Empire. Is fallen, the great city of the Roman Empire, because she, Rome, had made all nations drink of the wine of wrath of her fornication. That symbolizes the corrupting influence of the Romans, immortality and idolatry on the world. Verse 9, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, a clear and powerful warning, if anyone worships the beast, the Roman Empire, and his image, the outward manifestation of the Roman emperor, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, which is a sign of a complete and public commitment to the Roman emperor, he, the unfaithful person himself, shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God. That symbolizes punishment that awaits those who reject God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. That symbolizes the full force of God's wrath and judgment upon those who worship the Roman emperor. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, symbolizing the intense and destructive wrath of God. In the presence of the holy angel, that's the divine authority and presence of God, during the judgment of those who worship the beast, the Roman Empire, and in the presence of the Lamb Jesus. Verse 11, and the smoke, that's the eternal torment of those who reject God and do not believe in Jesus, ascend forever and ever, eternally, and they have no rest day or night, unending torment for unbelievers who worship the beast, the Roman emperor, and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name, a person who has chosen to fully align themselves with the Roman emperor. Verse 12, here is the patience of the saints. This is their unwavering endurance and faithfulness of God's people in the fate of persecution and trials. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, those who are faithful and obedient to God and Jesus. Verse 13, then John heard a voice from heaven saying to him, Write, Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, symbolizing that those who die faithfully to Christ will be blessed with eternal rest and reward in heaven. Yes, says the Spirit, symbolizing the Holy Spirit, conforming to the statement made about the blessings of those who die in the Lord, that they may rest in their labors and works, and their works follow them, symbolizing the promise that believers who die in the Lord will find eternal rest from the struggle of earthly life, while their good deeds and faithful service will be remembered and rewarded in heaven. Verses 14 through 16. Angie, would you read those?
Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he who sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped.
Thank you. Verse 14. Then John looked, and behold, a white cloud, symbolizing the divine presence of God. And on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, having on his head a golden crown that symbolizes authority and power as a ruler, and in his hand a sharp sickle, symbolizing the impending judgment of God. Verse 15, another angel, another messenger came out of the temple, God's dwelling place, crying with a loud voice, powerful and joyful proclamation, to him who sat on the cloud, Jesus Christ, thrust in your sickle and reap. This is the imminent and swift judgment of God on Rome. For the time has come for you to reap. So that's God's final judgment. For the harvest of the earth is ripe. It is time for God's final judgment. Verse 16, so he, Jesus, sat on the cloud in the divine presence of God, thrust his sickle on the earth, symbolizing the earth, the act of God's judgment upon Rome, and the earth was reaped. God's final judgment on Rome. Verses 17 through 20. Angie, could you read those?
Then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, who had power of fire over fire. And he cried with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs.
Okay, thank you, Angie.
You're welcome.
Verse 16, so he, Jesus, sat on the cloud in the divine presence of God, thrust the sickle on the earth. That is again symbolizes the act of God's judgment upon Rome. And the earth was reaped. That's God's final judgment on earth. Reaping the grapes of wrath. Oh, I'm sorry. I went back up to another verse. Apologize for that. Verse 17. Then another angel, messenger, came out of the temple, the God's dwelling place, which is in heaven. He, the messenger, also having a sharp sickle. The messenger also had God's judgment and destruction of Rome. Verse 18, and another angel, messenger, came from the altar, symbolizing a direct connection with God to God's judgment, who had power over fire, symbolizing God's justice and authority in judgment. And he cried with a loud voice, expressing the urgency and the power of God's judgment. To him, either the angel or Jesus. I think it's really immaterial which one it was, because they're both doing the same thing. They're both thrusting their sickles and reaping the thing, but that could be, to me, it could be either the angel or Jesus they're talking about here. To him, either the angel or Jesus, who had the sharp sickle, God's judgment and the gathering of the gathering of Rome, saying, thrust in your sharp sickle into the earth, that symbolize the receiving of the imminent and forceful judgment of God upon Rome, and together the clusters of the vine of the earth that symbolizes the destruction of Rome and the end of their sinful indulgence. And the earth was reaped. Roman's days of power and sinful indulgences is coming to an end. Verse 19, to the angel, a messenger thrust his sickle into the earth, symbolizing deliverance of God's imminent judgment on Rome, and gathered the vine of the earth, collecting the wicked people on earth, ready for God's final judgment, and threw them into a great winepress, which symbolizes the judging of Rome by the wrath of God. Verse 20, and the winepress, which God's judgment on Rome, was trampled, its complete destruction and bloodshed of God's enemies during the final judgment. Outside the city, which symbolizes a place of judgment or separation from God, away from the faithful of God, up to the horses' bridles, which symbolizes the amount of blood that was shed from God's judgment. For 1,600 furlongs, that symbolizes the vast and complete extent of God's judgment upon Rome. Any questions on chapter 14? To me, this all kind of sums up as what John was trying to tell the people or the churches of Asia, that they should be patient, they should endure, because they're going to be persecuted for a long period of time, but that persecution will come to an end, and they will have an eternal judgment, an eternal victory over Rome and all others if they just remain faithful and persevere. That's all I have for the lesson today. Are there any questions?
How long's a furlong?
I don't know. I've heard it referred to in horse racing, but I don't know what the length is. Does anybody?
My translation here says about the whole length would be about 180 miles long.
So the 1,600 furlongs is about 180 miles. Anything else? Well, I hope this helped y'all understand some of John symbolizing here. It helped me. I hope I got it all right, because I'm not sure. Thank you for your time.